On Sunday, July 23, 2006, the day began like any other in County Durham, England, with people going about their morning completely unaware that something terrible was about to happen. In the city of Durham, there is a wide-open space known as Riverside Park, a place that had long been used for public events, art shows, and live music, and had always been popular with visitors. That weekend, however, the park was hosting something very different. A massive inflatable artwork called Dreamspace. Dreamspace was created in 1996 by British artist Maurice Agus, and over the years it had traveled across Europe, drawing large crowds wherever it appeared. Maurice and his team arrived at Riverside Park on Saturday to set the structure up, and it was open to the public the following morning. That Sunday was bright and sunny with only a light breeze, and by late morning, around 500 people had gathered in the park to see the artwork. The structure was enormous, a tall and twisting maze that visitors could walk through and explore, made entirely of rubber and held up by air, similar to a bouncy castle. It stretched over 100 yards long and stood high above the grass. As the day went on, the wind slowly began to pick up, but the team believed the situation was under control, and Maurice instructed his workers to secure the structure with extra ropes before stepping away for a short tea break. Only moments after he left, the situation suddenly turned chaotic. The ropes and ground anchors meant to hold Dreamspace in place proved far too weak. The massive structure began to lift from the ground as the metal pegs snapped loose one by one, while staff rushed in and grabbed hold, desperately trying to keep it down, with even Maurice returning to help. At one point, nearly 40 people were pulling on the structure. A summer storm had formed, and powerful gusts of wind carried Dreamspace nearly 30 feet into the air, leaving onlookers frozen as the huge inflatable drifted across the park. What followed was complete chaos as staff rushed in to help the injured. 13 people were hurt in total, with several children suffering serious injuries such as broken ribs and damaged lungs. The most severe injuries were suffered by two women, one aged 39 and the other 68, who had been inside the structure when it fell and were crushed underneath it. Both were rushed to the hospital, but sadly, neither survived the night. In the aftermath, workers stated that Dreamspace had already lifted off the ground on previous days, and even earlier that same Sunday, and that these concerns had been reported to Maurice, who was aware of the issue but took no further action. In 2009, Maurice Agus was charged with causing death through carelessness, and after a 4-week trial, he was found not guilty, though he was fined for breaking safety rules. Maurice later said the incident affected him deeply and that he would never create anything like Dreamspace again. But just 2 months later, in 2009, he passed away as well. On a normal day, a man named Vadim was driving on the highway with his wife and their baby. It was Tuesday, June 12, 2012, around 11 in the morning. They were riding in their Audi A4 on a highway in Russia. The road was calm, and nothing seemed unusual. They were passing the 11th kilometer when they saw several large trucks coming toward them in the distance. The trucks were carrying 16 tons of bricks that had not been packed well. As the trucks drove past, one brick came loose at the worst possible moment. A camera on the car's dashboard later showed the brick falling from the truck and flying straight toward Vadim's car. There was no time to move or stop. The brick crashed through the windshield at 60 miles per hour and struck Vadim's 29-year-old wife, Olga, in the head. At first, Vadim did not understand what had happened. In the shock of the moment, he kept driving for a second. When he turned to look at his wife, he saw that her head had been split by the brick. The truck driver did not know that anything had happened and continued driving down the highway. Olga was rushed to Azov Hospital, where doctors tried for 2 hours to save her life. Sadly, they could not bring her back, and she was declared dead. Later, the driver of the truck was arrested for breaking traffic rules in a way that leads to someone's death. This story begins in Huntsville on October 2nd, 2021. A 29-year-old woman named Christina Nance was reported missing after she suddenly stopped going to work and stopped replying to calls and messages. Christina was known as a happy and kind person who loved to sing and made people smile. Her family told the police that they had not seen her since September 25th, a full week earlier. She had spoken to police before through a crisis team because of some mental health struggles, but nothing that made anyone think she would leave without telling someone or without leaving a note. Police began to search everywhere. They searched her home and her car, but she was nowhere to be found. Days went by, and she still did not answer any messages. Her family grew more worried with each passing day. On the morning of October 7th at around 9:15 a.m., officers at the Huntsville Police Department arrived for work like it was any normal day. As one officer walked through the parking lot, he noticed a pair of shoes sitting next to an old, unused police van. One of the van's windows was slightly open. The officer thought that maybe someone was sleeping inside, so he unlocked the doors to check. When he opened the van, he made a terrible discovery. Christina was inside. She had been locked in the back of the van, and she had been dead for days. The heat and damp air inside the van had made her body break down very quickly. At first, police feared that someone had put her there. They checked the security cameras in the parking lot and spent hours watching the footage. What they found shocked them. The video showed Christina walking around the police parking lot on September 25th. She walked up to different empty police cars and even sat on the front of one. After about 10 minutes, she walked over to the van. She checked the doors, saw that it was unlocked, opened it, and climbed into the back on her own. What she did not know was that the van had once been used to move inmates. The doors could be opened from the outside, but once they were shut, they locked from the inside. It was police policy to keep these vans locked at all times, but this one had been left unlocked. The footage showed that after Christina got inside, she never came back out. The windows were pushed from the inside, and there was movement seen in the van until September 28th. After that, there was nothing. The strange part was that one window was partly open. It seemed like it might have been enough for her to call out or get someone's attention. For reasons no one fully understands, she did not scream for help, or if she did, no one heard her. She was not found until 12 days after she first went missing. Her family was heartbroken and angry. They blamed the police for leaving the van unlocked and called it a deadly mistake. The police admitted that the van should have been locked and accepted responsibility for that failure. On the 2nd of January 2023, in Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia, the day was bright and sunny. The sky was clear and the ocean shone under the warm light. A group of tourists arrived at SeaWorld, excited for a scenic helicopter tour over the Gold Coast. They wanted to see the beautiful coastline and the marine animals from high above. The helicopter lifted gently into the sky, and the passengers looked out at the wide blue water and the long sandy beaches below. The wind rushed past them, and they felt happy and amazed as they watched the world grow smaller beneath their feet. It felt like a perfect day and a special memory in the making. The pilot stopped looking forward. One of the tourists noticed and tapped him on the shoulder, but in that brief moment, it was already too late. Just seconds later, their helicopter crashed into another helicopter that was taking off from SeaWorld for its own tour. The main rotor blades and the gearbox of the other helicopter broke apart, and it lost control. That helicopter fell and crashed onto a sandbar below. The helicopter with the camera inside was also badly damaged, but its pilot managed to steady it. With great effort, he brought it down for an emergency landing on the same sandbar. The landing was hard, and the helicopter was heavily damaged. People on the beach watched in shock as everything happened in front of them. Beachgoers, boaters, and nearby police officers rushed to help. They gave first aid and worked together to free the injured passengers from the wreckage. By the end of the day, 4 people had lost their lives. A 40-year-old pilot, a 36-year-old woman, and a British couple aged 65 and 57 did not survive. 6 others were badly hurt and were taken to the hospital for urgent care. Later, investigators tried to understand what had caused the crash. The pilot, who was already in the air, said he did not remember hearing a standard taxi call from the helicopter on the ground before it took off. However, this did not prove that the call was never made. The full cause was still not certain, but the tragedy left a deep mark on everyone who witnessed it. It was a cold Wednesday night on January 19th, 2022. In the small village of Vyra, just south of St. Petersburg in Russia, a woman named Anna Uskova got ready for a yearly tradition. Anna was 41 years old and worked as a lawyer in the city. Every year she took part in the Epiphany tradition, where people dip into icy water believing it has special healing powers. That year, Anna decided to do it in the Odesh River, a place known to be very dangerous. The river had a strong, fast current that could sweep people away. Even in summer, it had claimed lives. But Anna had done this tradition many times before, so she felt confident. The air was freezing, around -5 degrees Celsius. Anna wore a black one-piece swimsuit. She made the sign of the cross and jumped into a rectangular hole cut in the thick ice. Around her there were no lights, no ropes, no handrails, nothing to make it safer. As soon as she went into the river, the strong current grabbed her and pulled her under. People watching immediately realized something was wrong. Her children cried loudly, and her husband jumped into the river to try to save her. But the water was dark and muddy, and he could not find her. Emergency services were called. A rescue team with divers came, but even they could not find Anna. Days passed, and divers and state rescuers searched again and again, but there was still no sign of her. 11 days later, volunteers used underwater drones and finally found a body a kilometer downstream from the ice hole. It was Anna. This tragedy could have been avoided. Russian officials warned people not to do the same thing, and Alexander Zoev, the head of the Emergency Rescue Service, said it was wrong to place the ice hole in such a dangerous part of the river without safety measures. On a sunny morning, August 6, 2016, Tyler arrived at the Lode Parachuting Center in California. He had a mild case of cerebral palsy, but he refused to let it hold him back. This was going to be his first tandem skydive. Tyler was full of life. He loved fun and adventure, and he was a talented musician. Everyone who knew him adored him. The Lode Parachuting Center was well known. Opened in 1964 in California's Central Valley, it was one of the largest and oldest drop zones in the United States. That morning, Tyler was paired with 25-year-old instructor Yong Kwan. Yong had jumped 700 times before. Before they suited up, Yong filmed Tyler and greeted him warmly. Tyler smiled in the sunlight, joking about the jump, and said he loved his mom. He waved to his mother and promised he would make it through, and then they boarded the plane, climbed above the clouds, and jumped together. Heartbreakingly, things went wrong. During the fall, Yong tried to open the parachute, but it failed. Tyler and Yong plunged 13,000 feet to the ground. The video of Tyler joking about the jump became haunting after that. Family and friends watched in horror as the authorities arrived. A coroner's van took the two bodies away. Investigators found that Yong, despite his experience, did not have the proper license to perform the tandem jump. He was still in training and on probation. Even more shocking, the Lodi Parachuting Center had a history of around 20 deaths since it opened. Yet the owner, Bill, reopened the center the very next day. When questioned by police, he seemed cold and unremorseful. "It's unfortunate, but accidents happen," he said. Tyler's family took Bill to court, accusing him of negligent homicide. After years of legal battle, in March 2021, they won. The court awarded them $40 million in compensation. On January 8, 2022, the sun shone brightly over Capaloto, a city in southwest Brazil. The days before had brought heavy rain, leaving the ground soaked. People were drawn to Furnace Lake, a place known for its tall cliffs, hidden caves, and sparkling waterfalls. The green waters of the lake looked calm and inviting, and the cliffs rose more than 20 meters above, making the view breathtaking. Around midday, tourists gathered for what should have been a happy day on the lake. 4 boats floated gently on the water, carrying between 70 and 100 people. Suddenly, small rocks began to fall from the cliffs above. At first, they were just little pebbles, but soon larger rocks started crashing down. Panic spread across the boats as people realized the danger. The cliffs could not hold any longer. A massive section of rock broke away and slammed down onto 3 of the boats. Chaos erupted. People screamed and tried to save each other, pulling friends and strangers from the water. In the end, the tragedy took the lives of 10 people and left 32 more injured. The Brazilian Navy investigated and found that the heavy rains had weakened the cliffs, causing them to collapse. What had started as a day of fun turned into a day of heartbreak. It was Wednesday, October 31st, 1990. Joe Barris, a 32-year-old magician from America, known to everyone as Amazing Joe, had a plan. That night, he was going to be buried alive. Even the famous Houdini had tried something like this and failed. Before the stunt, he said proudly, "I believe I'm the next Houdini, and even greater." The plan was dangerous. Joe's hands would be tied tightly, his arms bound, and ropes would wrap around his neck and body so he could not move at all. Then he would be placed inside a special glass coffin. Once inside, the coffin would be lowered into a 7-foot deep hole. Dirt and cement would be poured on top until he was completely buried. Joe looked calm and sharp in his white tuxedo, unaware of what would happen next. Then disaster struck. The glass could not hold the enormous weight. It broke with a loud, heartbreaking crash. An estimated 9 tons of dirt and cement poured down, crushing the coffin completely. People could hear the sound of glass and plastic shattering. Rescuers rushed to dig Joe out. They dug as fast as they could, but it was too late. When they finally reached him, he was gone. The stunt that Joe had dreamed of his whole life had ended in tragedy. Justin Vicky loved the gym. To him, lifting weights was more than just exercise. It made him stronger, healthier, and happier. He wanted to help others feel the same way. Videos from the gym show him preparing to lift a barbell loaded with 210 kilograms. He gripped the iron bar, a spotter standing behind him, and began his sets. At first, everything seemed normal. He squatted a few times, but soon it became clear that his strength was fading. The barbell slowly lowered toward the floor. The spotter did not step in as expected. Then, in an instant, Justin's legs gave out. The barbell crashed down onto his neck. His neck and back were broken, and vital nerves were severed. Everything happened in a blink. Justin was critically injured, and despite the spotter's presence, help came too late. The barbell was lifted off him, but the damage was already done. Justin went into spasms and was rushed to the hospital. Doctors worked quickly, but his injuries were too severe. He slipped into a coma and passed away the next day at just 33 years old. Justin was laid to rest in his family's plot in East Java, the town where his parents lived. On May 24th, Karen and Asaf were married after months of careful planning. Everything about their day was prepared in detail, from the ceremony to the evening reception. That night, around 700 guests gathered at a large 3-story wedding hall in West Jerusalem to celebrate. The hall had been built quickly using a construction method that relied on thin concrete instead of strong steel support. A 3rd floor was added late in the building process, and important weight calculations were never completed. Over time, the floor began to bend, but the problem was poorly handled and even made worse by changes to the building. As the reception continued, guests filled the top floor, dancing, laughing, and jumping together to the music. The floor was already carrying far more weight than it was designed to hold. Without any warning, the center of the hall collapsed, sending hundreds of people crashing down through the floors below. Concrete, metal, and dust filled the air as people were trapped beneath the rubble. Panic spread as guests tried to escape and search for loved ones. Emergency crews arrived within minutes and worked through the night and into the next day, digging by hand because the building was too unstable for heavy machines. In the end, 23 people lost their lives and hundreds were injured. The bride and groom survived, though their wedding day was forever changed. The hall was later demolished, and those responsible were punished. On the morning of November 30th, 2021, a normal workday began in the city of Taichung in Taiwan. A 50-year-old man named Zheng arrived at his job with the water company, where he spent his days fixing and caring for pipes that ran deep under the ground. That morning, Zheng was sent to work on a large steel pipe that carried fast-moving water beneath the streets. Around 11:30 a.m., Zheng sat on top of the pipe inside a wide trench. Zheng held a hammer and had already cut a section of the pipe, and his plan was to knock that piece free. Instead of standing beside the pipe, he stayed on top of it and struck it again and again, each hit loud and strong as it rang through the open air. Then, without warning, the pipe broke open beneath him. In a single moment, Zheng lost his balance and slid feet first into the pipe below. His co-workers froze in shock as they watched him vanish into the dark pipe, where water rushed through at great speed and force. Later that same day, the pipe was cut open and Zheng was found inside. He had been badly hurt, and when help arrived, they could only say that he had died. Many people later said the accident could have been stopped if simple safety steps had been taken. On August 1st, 2022, a man named Muthukumar was helping prepare food for a festival in India. A large pot of sweet porridge was cooking in the open street, uncovered and boiling hot. CCTV footage shows him standing close to the pot while swaying and looking unsteady. In a moment of poor judgment, he decides to sit on the edge of the boiling pot. People nearby notice how dangerous it is and watch in confusion, and one person even reaches out to check if he is okay. Before anyone can stop him, he tries to fully sit down, but misses the edge and falls straight into the pot, sinking into the boiling porridge up to his neck. He is still conscious and immediately goes into shock. He tries to pull himself out, but every surface around him is burning hot, causing him to freeze in panic. Several people rush to help and grab his arms, but they struggle to pull him free without burning themselves. After repeated attempts, the entire pot tips over into the street, spilling the porridge and throwing him onto the ground. He manages to stand and walk away, but his injuries are severe. He suffered deep burns over most of his body and was rushed to the hospital, where he sadly died later that night. Police later reported that he had epilepsy, though it was never confirmed whether he was having a seizure at the time of the fall. It was a bright and beautiful morning on February 26, 2013, in Luxor, Egypt. The sun rose over the ancient temples and tombs, casting a golden light across the desert. A group of 20 tourists gathered together, excited and smiling. Today they would take a hot air balloon ride, a dream experience floating high above the stunning landscape. The balloon slowly began to fill with hot air. The passengers climbed into the basket. Soon the balloon lifted off the ground. The air was calm, and the heat from the burners warmed their faces. From above they could see the temples and fields stretching out below. Everything felt magical, but the magic didn't last. As the balloon came in for landing, a small fire suddenly appeared in the center of the balloon. Panic swept through the basket. The pilot and one tourist made a desperate choice. They jumped out, but it was only the beginning of the chaos. The sudden change in weight, helped by a gust of wind, sent the balloon shooting straight up into the sky. It climbed faster and faster, reaching nearly 1,000 feet. Screams filled the air as 7 more people jumped, trying to escape. The rest held on terrified. The fire grew larger, and the balloon rose even higher. Soon it could no longer hold together. The balloon exploded violently, spinning and falling through the air. It crashed into a sugarcane field below. Ambulances arrived 15 minutes later. The scene was heartbreaking. 19 people had died. Only the pilot and the first tourist who jumped survived. Investigators later found that a gas leak in the balloon caused the fire. What started as a beautiful adventure ended in tragedy, marking the worst hot air balloon disaster in Egypt's history. Jessie Combs was born in South Dakota, and she loved cars more than anything. After finishing college in 1998, she started working with cars and diesel engines. She was so good behind the wheel that in 2013, she set a land speed record for women. 3 years later, she broke her own record and became known as the fastest woman on four wheels. Jessie also co-hosted a TV show called Extreme 4x4 for over 90 episodes from 2005 to 2009. Whatever she chose to do, she always excelled. On August 27, 2019, Jessie had one big goal: to beat the land speed record set by Kitty O'Neill in 1976. In the Alv Desert in Oregon, she climbed into a huge jet-powered car called the North American Eagle Supersonic Challenger. The car was 56 feet long and had 52,000 horsepower. Even though she had tried and failed before, Jessie was determined to make history. The video shows her racing across the desert at an unbelievable speed. Dust rose behind the car as it moved faster than most people could imagine. But just seconds later, everything went wrong. The car burst into flames. The crash was so bad that the vehicle was completely destroyed. Sadly, there was nothing anyone could do to save Jessie. Investigators later found out that the front wheel assembly had failed while she was going 523 miles per hour. Even though she died, Jessie had already broken the record. The Guinness Book of World Records gave her the title of the fastest woman on Earth after her death. She was remembered not just as a record breaker, but as a fearless driver and a true pioneer in the world of racing. In October 2022, a 39-year-old man named Sergio went on holiday to Brazil with his girlfriend. They were both excited to spend time together and try new things. They explored the area, enjoyed the warm weather, and took part in different activities. But there was one thing Sergio really wanted to do. He had his heart set on riding a zip line. On October 10, 2022, they traveled to Canoa Quebrada in northeastern Brazil, where Sergio had booked a zipline ride over the sand dunes. When they arrived, he put on his harness and got ready. He took out his phone to record the moment. Without much thought, he stepped forward and jumped off the platform. As he moved along the line, he smiled as the wind blew through his hair. He shouted with joy and wonder. He was amazed by the view and the feeling of flying over the sand. It was clear that he was having the best time of his life. He began to go faster as he reached the middle of the zip line. Then, without any warning at all, everything changed. The entire zip line suddenly gave way. In an instant, Sergio was left hanging in the air before he fell straight down. The fall was fast and hard. He hit the sand with great force. His girlfriend, who was filming him from the side, captured the terrible moment when the line broke and he came crashing down. Staff members ran toward him right away, and paramedics were called to help. Sadly, Sergio did not survive. When officials looked into what had happened, they found that a wooden support post had pulled completely out of the sand at one end of the line. The ride that was meant to bring him joy had failed in the worst way. It was a bright Sunday morning on December 1st, 2022, in the small town of Pamukova near Istanbul. A young woman named Burcu Saglam, 22 years old, decided to take a special flight for fun. She worked as a beautician, and life had not been easy lately. Many job opportunities had slipped away, so she wanted a moment of joy in the sky to relieve stress. Her friend, Hakan Kosal, a 54-year-old pilot, was going to fly with her. He owned a small single-engine plane. In the afternoon, after getting ready, they took off. Burcu shared her adventure on social media. She took pictures of the amazing landscapes and snapped selfies in the cockpit. Her last photo, sent just minutes before tragedy, seemed ordinary but would soon carry a haunting meaning. About 20 minutes into the flight, around 3:32 p.m., the plane suddenly stopped sending messages. It was flying at about 4,000 feet when contact was lost. Later, the broken remains of the plane were found in an empty parking lot near a gas plant. Hakan had been thrown from the plane during the crash and had died from his injuries. Burcu was still inside the aircraft. Her father, shocked and heartbroken, was called to identify her body. It was only by recognizing her jewelry that they were able to confirm it was her. Investigators watched CCTV footage and found that the plane had hit a high-voltage power cable before crashing to the ground. Some officials suggested fog might have caused the accident. At the start of 2019, a 47-year-old man from Japan named Tetsu Shiohara was told he had stage 4 cancer. Tetsu was kind and quiet. He did not have many friends and lived a very private life. The doctors said he had only a 1% chance to live. Even after hearing this, he chose to keep going with treatment and tried not to let the news take away his smile. The illness changed the way he saw his life. He left his job as a lawyer and said he wanted to live his life, not spend it working all the time. After he got sick, Tetsu started sharing his daily life online. He streamed simple things like going to the shop, cooking dinner, and taking walks. People who watched him said he seemed hopeful and believed he would get better. Even though he streamed for a long time, only a small number of people followed him. Then, on October 28, 2019, he decided to do something big. He started a live stream on a website called Nikoniko and gave it the title, "Let's Go to Snowy Mount Fuji." As soon as the stream began, he stepped past barriers that clearly said no climbing and started going up the mountain. Mount Fuji is the tallest mountain in Japan. It rises about 3,777 meters above the ground. In October, the climbing season is over. The mountain is covered in ice and snow, and it is officially closed. There are warning signs, but no guards to stop someone who really wants to go up. At that time of year, climbing it is not a simple hike. It becomes a serious and dangerous trip that needs careful planning and proper gear. Tetsu either did not understand this danger or chose to ignore it. He wore tennis shoes and light street clothes. He carried only climbing poles, a thin pair of gloves, and his phone to stream. As he climbed higher, he said his fingers felt frozen and painful. Still, he told his viewers, he had to keep going so he could reach the top on camera. Against the cold and the ice, he somehow made it to the summit. But that is when everything changed. The snow under his feet gave way, and he slipped. He began sliding down the steep side of the mountain. On the live stream, he could be seen trying to stop himself. He pushed his poles into the ice and reached for anything he could grab, but nothing worked. He had no special tools to save himself. Snow flew around him as he slid faster and faster. Then he went over a steep edge and tumbled down the mountain. All of it happened live in front of the people watching. Soon the video cut off. The next day, his frozen body was found more than 1,000 meters below the place where he fell. Armin was a wingsuit flyer from Italy. He was very skilled at skydiving and flying. He also had a young child. Many people followed him online and watched him do very risky stunts that most people would never try. In August 2016, Armin became focused on wind gliding. He had been doing it for about 1 year and felt very confident. He traveled to the top of a mountain near Kandersteg in Switzerland. From there, he started a live video for his viewers. On the stream, he could be seen getting his suit ready. He was smiling and looked very excited. He seemed calm and happy. After checking his gear, he put his phone into his backpack and jumped off the mountain. Because the phone was inside the bag, only wind and loud rushing sounds could be heard. At first, everything sounded fine. Then suddenly, there was a shout and a loud crash. After that, the video went quiet. The only sound left was cowbells ringing far away. People watching the live video were shocked and scared. Many sent messages asking him to say something or show a sign he was okay. But there was no reply. The next day, police found his body near Kandersteg, close to a well-known jumping spot. He died from a serious head injury. The police were not able to tell exactly what caused the accident. This terrible event took place in Indonesia at Kanjuruhan Stadium on Saturday, October 1st, 2022. That day, fans of Arema FC came to watch their team play against their biggest rival, Persebaya Surabaya. It was a huge match that many people had been waiting for. The stadium was mainly used for football games and could hold about 38,000 people. But because this match was so important, more tickets were sold than the stadium could safely handle. Around 42,000 tickets were sold, and the stands were packed with excited fans. When the game ended, Arema FC lost 3-2. It was their first home defeat in 23 years. Many fans were shocked and angry. Some of the supporters ran down from the stands and climbed over the barriers onto the field. In the chaos, police officers were attacked, and some players were also hurt. 5 police cars were damaged and set on fire. People were shouting and screaming, and the police tried to push the crowd back with batons. When the situation became too hard to control, the police fired tear gas into the crowd. Tear gas is not allowed in stadiums under FIFA rules because it causes pain in the eyes, throat, and skin and makes it hard to breathe. In a crowded stadium, it can cause fear very quickly. As the gas spread, thousands of people began to panic. They all tried to run toward the exits, especially gates 12 and 10. A stampede began. Many were crushed or trapped against walls with no space to move. There was nowhere to escape. By the end of the day, when the sun had set, the world learned how serious the disaster had been. A total of 125 people lost their lives, including 32 children who had only come to watch a football match. The league was stopped at once, and the whole country was left in deep shock. Bullfighting is not allowed in the United Kingdom, but in places like Spain, France, Mexico, Colombia, and Venezuela, people still have this event. Many people in these countries see bullfighting as part of their culture and think of it as a kind of art. Every year it is thought that about 250,000 bulls are killed in these fights and festivals. On June 26, 2022, many people gathered in the small town of El Espinal in central Colombia for a popular local festival. The crowd came to see a bull event called a corraleja, where anyone from the public can go into the ring and tease the bull. As the event began, people cheered and clapped. More than 800 people climbed into a tall wooden stand to watch. Without warning, one side of the stand gave way. The wooden structure collapsed, throwing many people down into the arena and onto the hard ground. People were trapped under the broken wood and metal. Some were buried, and others were left in the ring with the bull. In the chaos, people shouted and tried to help each other. Some jumped down on purpose to draw the bull's attention away from those who were hurt or stuck. Rescue teams worked hard to free those caught in the wreckage. Many people were pulled out and taken to local hospitals. At the end of the day, hundreds were hurt, and sadly, several people lost their lives. Colombia's president-elect at the time said he wanted local leaders to stop allowing dangerous shows that put both people and animals at risk. On December 4th, 2021, something terrible happened in the small town of Moringi, about 200 kilometers east of Nairobi, Kenya. What should have been a happy day turned into a heartbreaking tragedy. A bus with 45 passengers set off to attend a wedding in a village on the other side of the Nzui River. The bus was full of excitement. Their voices were full of laughter and cheerful songs as they climbed aboard the St. Joseph ceremony bus. When they reached the river, the calm waters had turned into a fast, dangerous current. Their spirits were high, determined not to let the river ruin their special day. The driver knew the crossing was dangerous, but some passengers complained that they were already late. They urged him to go on. Feeling pressure and perhaps afraid of being seen as a coward, the driver made a tragic choice. He drove into the rushing waters, hoping to cross safely. The bus tipped and tumbled violently. In their fear, they accidentally trampled each other as they tried to escape. By the end of that day, the river had claimed 33 lives. Only 12 people survived, stunned and grieving. Among the dead were the bus driver, the bridegroom's daughter, and her 3 young children. Sadly, this river had taken lives before on the same road. People still wonder why no bridge had been built to keep travelers safe. On Sunday, July 24th, 2021, the day began like any other in Himachal Pradesh, a quiet mountain region in northern India where locals live their daily lives and tourists travel to enjoy the peaceful views. The area is known for tall mountains, narrow roads, and small scenic towns, and many people visit to hike, explore, and escape busy city life. But in the days leading up to that Sunday, the weather had been changing as non-stop monsoon rain poured down without rest, soaking the land day and night. Rivers swelled, power failed, and flash floods rushed through villages while the wet soil weakened the mountains, making landslides more and more likely. That afternoon at around 1:25 p.m., the mountain above Sangla, Chitkul Road, finally gave in, and dirt and rocks began to break loose and fall. Within seconds, huge boulders, some as large as cars, came crashing down from above, slamming into the ground and tearing through everything below. The moment was caught on video, showing rocks falling like heavy rain, bouncing and spinning as they destroyed roads, trees, and anything in their path. As the rocks continued to fall, one massive boulder smashed into a bridge and destroyed it as if it were nothing, while just below the landslide, a tourist bus was driving along the road, carrying 11 people, including the driver. And as they traveled forward, they suddenly heard a loud roaring sound coming from the mountain above them. There was no time to react, no way to escape, and no place to hide before a huge boulder slammed directly into the bus, killing 8 people instantly. Another passenger later died from their injuries while being rushed to the hospital. One of the people on the bus was a woman named Dr. Deepa Sharma, who had been backpacking across India and sharing moments from her journey online. Just hours before the landslide, she posted a photo on Twitter with the words, "Life is nothing without Mother Nature." She would pass away later that same day. After the tragedy, India's Prime Minister announced financial help for the families of those who lost their lives, as well as aid for the injured. On the evening of October 30th, 2022, as people across India celebrated the Gujarati New Year, hundreds of families and friends walked toward the Morbi Bridge in the town of Morbi. It was around 6:30 p.m., and many were heading across the bridge to reach a festival filled with music, lights, and dancing. The bridge stretched over the Machu River, linking 2 nearby districts and serving as a well-known spot for visitors. The bridge had been built in 1900 during British rule and was once praised as a great work of engineering. It was long, measuring about 230 meters, but it was very narrow, only wide enough for a few people to walk side by side. For more than 100 years, it had been a popular place to visit and a key path between parts of the town. For 2 years, the bridge had been closed for repairs. It finally reopened on October 28th, just days before the holiday. When the celebrations arrived, people rushed toward it with excitement. Soon the bridge was packed tightly with people standing shoulder to shoulder, all trying to move forward. While the bridge was meant to hold only 125 people, more than 400 were on it at the same time. As people slowly crossed, some began to shake and sway the bridge, treating it like a game. Without warning, the bridge snapped in the middle and collapsed. Within seconds, hundreds of people were thrown into the dark and cold river below. Some tried to hold onto ropes or nets, but there was no space and no time. Those who were not hurt in the fall struggled to breathe as others fell on top of them. It became a fight to stay alive. People standing along the riverbank rushed to help. Locals formed human chains and pulled survivors from the water, saving many lives. Soon after, rescue teams arrived and worked through the night and into the next day, searching the river and lifting people out. More than 180 people were rescued, many of them clinging to broken parts of the bridge. Sadly, rescue workers also kept finding bodies. In total, 135 people lost their lives. Many of the victims were women, elderly people, and children. The youngest was just 18 months old. Later, officials said the private company that repaired the bridge reopened it to the public without proper notice. Because of this, no safety check was done before people were allowed back on. Officials also said the crowd size and the shaking of the bridge made the disaster worse. Many people blamed local leaders for allowing the bridge to become so crowded and for opening it too soon. Police later arrested 9 people connected to the company that managed the bridge including ticket workers, guards, and other staff, for allowing people onto the bridge before it was safe. On the morning of February 28, 2023, in the southern part of the Tempe Valley in Greece, a routine train journey turned into a disaster. Intercity 62, a passenger train traveling from Athens to Thessaloniki, departed at 7:22 p.m. carrying 340 passengers and 12 staff, a total of 352 people. By 11:09 p.m., the train had left Larissa Station. For reasons that remain unclear, the station master made a critical mistake. He failed to use the proper key to guide the train onto the correct track. For nearly 12 minutes, the train stayed on the wrong path, heading downhill at high speed, straight toward a freight train coming in the opposite direction on the same track. At 11:21 p.m., both trains, each traveling over 100 miles per hour, collided. The first 4 passenger cars derailed, and the very first car exploded into a massive fireball, reaching temperatures of 1,300 degrees Celsius. The scene, captured on CCTV, was horrifying. Emergency services rushed to the wreckage after numerous emergency calls. They found crushed train cars, twisted metal, and flames consuming much of the wreckage. Firefighters and first responders worked tirelessly to rescue as many people as they could. The crash became the deadliest railway disaster in Greek history. 57 people lost their lives, most of them students. 66 others were injured, and 6 were placed on life support. The entire nation mourned. In the aftermath, Transport Minister Kostas stepped down, admitting that he had failed to modernize Greece's railway system. In the small town of Yavatmal, right in the middle of India, a young man named Ismail had a big dream. He was 24 years old, full of energy, and always thinking of new ways to help his village. Ismail didn't have many cars or much transport around, so he wanted to make something special, something no one in his village had ever seen before. He decided he would build a helicopter. He watched countless YouTube videos and read every forum he could find. Piece by piece, he learned how to build what he imagined. Slowly, he started putting it together. He welded steel pipes into a strong frame and even fitted a Maruti 800 car engine to give it power. After months of hard work, his first prototype was ready. Excited, Ismail began small test flights. He let the rotors spin as fast as they could and watched carefully. Over the next year, he managed to lift the helicopter a few feet off the ground. As India's Independence Day approached, Ismail wanted to show his village what he had made. But before that, he needed one last test. On August 10th, 2021, he invited his friends to watch. The sun had gone down, and the small town grew quiet, with everyone gathering around to see the Mona in action. Ismail climbed into the helicopter and started the engine. At first, everything seemed fine. The blades began spinning, and it looked like the helicopter might lift off. Then, without warning, the rear rotor went out of control. It shattered instantly and smashed into the main rotor. Metal twisted and flew everywhere. In the blink of an eye, the spinning blade struck Ismail. Silence fell over the friends as they rushed to him, but it was too late. He was taken to a hospital in Boussoussad, but the injuries were too severe. Ismail lost his life that night. He only wanted to make his village proud and show what he could do, but this tragic story reminds us that safety must come first. Trying to build a helicopter alone with just videos from the internet was dangerous. If it had worked, Ismail could have made history and national news, but sadly, that dream ended too soon. On the morning of February 15th, 2023, in Nepal, Yeti Airlines Flight 691 was ready to take off from Kathmandu. It was 10:33 a.m., and the flight was set to go to Pokhara. The journey was short, only about 25 minutes. The plane was a 15-year-old twin-engine turboprop. The flight started smoothly. Passengers looked out the windows, expecting a normal trip. But as Flight 691 approached the newly built airport in Pokhara, something went wrong. Suddenly, the engines lost power, dropping to zero thrust. The left wing dipped sharply. In just a second, the plane crashed. People on the ground captured the crash on video. The plane tilted steeply to the left before hitting the ground. Some footage was even recorded from inside the plane by a passenger and streamed live on Facebook. When rescue teams arrived, the scene was tragic. Half of the plane had fallen into the gorge, and it was completely on fire. There were no survivors. All 72 people on board had died. Investigators later studied the crash and discovered what went wrong. Less than 2 minutes before hitting the ground, the co-pilot called to extend the flaps, but the flight data showed that the flaps did not move. Instead, the engines slowly lost power and eventually stopped. Investigators think that one of the pilots may have accidentally moved the power lever instead of the flap lever, causing both engines to stop working. It was also found that the pilots did not follow routine checklists, and only 14 seconds before the crash, the co-pilot handed control over to the more experienced captain. By then, it was too late. India has one of the biggest railway networks in the world. Its trains run on over 82,000 miles of track. Every day, millions of people ride these trains. In fact, about 18 million passengers travel by train in India every single day. But on June 2nd, 2023, the usual chaos turned into a nightmare. That evening, around 6:30 p.m., two huge passenger trains were heading straight toward each other in the Balasore district of eastern India. As the clock neared 7 p.m., disaster struck. The Coromandel Express got a green signal to switch to a parallel track. But on that track was a cargo train, heavy with 6 iron-filled carriages sitting completely still. The Coromandel Express crashed into the cargo train with terrible force. Its carriages folded like paper in a zigzag pattern. The engine lifted off the ground, and the rest of the train spilled across the tracks. The Bengaluru Howrah Express was passing on the opposite line at the same moment. It hit the derailed carriages of the Coromandel Express. The first 4 carriages of the Howrah Express derailed, and the rest piled up into each other. Hundreds of people were trapped in twisted metal and shattered glass. When rescue teams arrived, they saw total destruction. Firefighters, doctors, police officers, and hundreds of ambulances rushed to the scene. About 80 people were confirmed dead at first, and around 200 were trapped. The final count showed 293 people had died, and at least 1,000 were injured. Many bodies were so badly damaged that police had to use personal belongings like phones or luggage to identify them. The investigation showed that the train drivers did nothing wrong. The green signal that caused the Coromandel Express to switch tracks was given manually from the main office. On July 7, 2023, 3 railway officials were arrested. They were charged with causing the accident and hiding evidence. Newspapers reported that their actions had led to India's deadliest rail accident in 100 years. This story takes place on Yungas Road, a narrow road in Bolivia that many people call Death Road. The road became well known after it was shown on Top Gear during the Bolivia special in 2009. In December 2011, a double-decker bus was traveling along this steep and dangerous road. The mountains rose high on one side, and on the other side there was a deep drop. The road was thin, rough, and covered in mud in many places. The bus moved forward slowly as it followed the sharp turns. As the bus continued, the driver suddenly saw that part of the road ahead had been damaged by a landslide. Mud and loose dirt had covered the path, and the edge of the road looked weak. It did not seem possible that such a large bus could pass through that spot. There was no space to turn around, and there was no safe way to reverse. The road was too narrow, and the drop was too close. The driver made a quick choice. He told all 50 passengers to get off the bus and stand back on the road, and trying to understand what they had just seen on that lonely mountain road. In April 2022, a skier was exploring the majestic Meiji Mountain near La Grave in the Southern Alps. He carried a GoPro, capturing the breathtaking scenery around him. The mountains stretched endlessly, bathed in sunlight, and he felt a deep sense of wonder as he took in the view. But suddenly everything changed. Without warning, the snow beneath him gave way, and he fell into a dark, hidden crevice. The drop was terrifying. Despite the danger, the skier stayed calm. He used his skis to slow his fall, skillfully sliding down the steep slope as if he were defying gravity. Against all odds, he managed to land on a narrow ledge, holding on tightly as he looked down into the dark void below. His friends were ready for emergencies like this. It took them 15 to 20 minutes to reach him, carefully making their way to the icy crevice. They worked together, using crampons, pickaxes, and shovels, to finally pull him free from the glacier's icy grip. After a short rest, he even got back on his skis, continuing down the mountain. His calmness and skill left his companions amazed. On the night of August 12, 2015, in the busy port city of Tianjin, China, something terrifying was about to happen. Tianjin is huge. It sits by the Bohai Sea, about 84 miles from Beijing, and is one of the biggest ports in northern China, and one of the largest in the world. Ships arrive here carrying all kinds of goods, from cars and building materials to dangerous chemicals. In the northwest corner of the port, a massive warehouse, the size of 10 football fields, stood quietly. It belonged to a company called Ruihai International Logistics. Inside, there were huge piles of dangerous chemicals, potassium nitrate, sodium cyanide, and other explosives. Chinese law says you can't store more than 25 tons of these chemicals in one place. But inside this warehouse there were over 3,000 tons. That included 800 tons of sodium cyanide and 1,300 tons of potassium nitrate. The mix was a disaster waiting to happen. As the clock struck 11 p.m., while most people were asleep, the first emergency calls came in. A fire had broken out in the warehouse. Firefighters rushed to the scene, but they didn't know what they were dealing with. They tried to put out the fire with water. The chemicals reacted violently with water. About 30 minutes later, the first explosion ripped through the warehouse. A huge fireball shot into the sky, and seismic sensors recorded it at 2.1 on the Richter scale. But the worst was still coming. Just 30 seconds later, a second, massive explosion shook the city, measuring 2.9 on the Richter scale. The entire warehouse was gone. A red fireball and a huge plume of smoke shot hundreds of meters into the air, so big that people thought it was a nuclear bomb. The blast shattered every window in a 2-kilometer radius. Buildings shook on their foundations. Power went out across the city. People were left in darkness, with only the enormous fire lighting up the night sky. Firefighters fought to control the flames, but when the fire finally died down, the warehouse was gone, replaced by a massive crater. The explosion destroyed a large section of the port. Ash and fumes rained down, and dangerous chemicals seeped into the ground. People living within 3 kilometers had to evacuate because the water supply was at risk. In the end, this explosion became one of the largest man-made non-nuclear explosions ever recorded, equal to 300 tons of TNT. It caused over $1 billion in damage and killed 173 people. The firefighters had no way of knowing what chemicals were inside, so using water made the fire worse. But the real blame lies with Ruihai International Logistics. They stored massive amounts of chemicals far beyond the legal limit. They put flammable materials next to explosive ones. The fire started because one chemical dried out and spontaneously caught fire. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The tragedy shocked the world. Investigations followed. In 2016, 49 people were punished, 25 government officials and 24 company managers. Ruihai's chairman, Yu Zhou, was found guilty of bribing officials to ignore safety laws. He was fined about $100,000 and given a suspended death sentence, which is like life in prison in China.